Hello everyone and welcome to the June edition of EdTech Monday Kenya. My name is Joy Doreen Bira, and EdTech Monday Kenya is a show that leverages on technology to advance education and learning. And today we're here to talk about open educational resources. Can education technology harness open licensing? That's the question we are posing to you today, and we're also here to answer some of those questions. For instance, what exactly are open educational resources? Why are they important in education technology? And how exactly can we increase the players of open licenses or OER players in the country today? Allow me to introduce my guests. Suraj Shah, who is the lead Regional Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning at the Mastercard Foundation. We also have Jay Larson, who is the co-founder, Tuna Panda Institute. We have Maureen Apu, who is the content creator and ICT coach at Learning Lions. And we also have our sign language interpreter, Rose Omolo. So to start us off with this conversation, open educational resources, really, the concept of it. What is it and why is it important for us to have this discussion right about now? I'm going to start with Suraj Shah. Tell us a bit more about OERs and why it's important that we are even having this conversation.
The obvious benefit of OERs is it expands access to education across, to learners, to educators. At Mastercard Foundation, our objective under education is to improve learning outcomes. And to do that, we need to ensure that our activities are availed, the access to education is as wide as possible. The Regional Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning is looking to catalyze the EdTech ecosystem so as to be able to expand the access to learning. So we look at opportunities, far and wide. We increase our opportunities circle, and OERs are part of that. However, in order for our strategy to work, we have to explore the balance between the sustainability of the EdTech ecosystem and OERs. And that's why we're having this conversation, because we believe it is possible.
Jay, you have plenty of experience supporting and nurturing for-profit startups. Do you want to share with us exactly how best Kenyan EdTech businesses can use these open educational resources? And also, why should EdTech businesses even care about this concept, just as Suraj has explained?
So I think this is a fundamental question to not just education, but the future of humanity, really. And the question we're asking is, how do we deploy technology and also people's time to create the best resources to help humans improve themselves? And so as an industry and as entrepreneurs, we have to ask ourselves, how do we still solve these problems without the same constraints? And it's an important problem to solve and to think about critically, because publishing houses, institutions, they provide a service of making sure that we as the consumers and that parents and that society can trust what's actually in there.
All right. Maureen, I want to bring you in as an ICT coach and also a content creator based in Turkana with Learning Lions. The fact that you're even able to use these OERs is quite impressive. So do share with us your experience interacting with open educational resources and how this has been beneficial both to you and your learners.
From being a learner to being a teacher, it's fulfilling, because it's OER changed my perspective of looking at education. I couldn't finish my own education in college, so when I went back home and I joined Learning Lions, it was like new hope for me. So when I learned it and I saw how it benefited me as an individual, I thought it could also help others in my community. to learn and earn and innovate using the OER content. So for the benefit for the learner, I gained new skills. It was flexible for me because in Turkana, most areas, we do not really have strong internet, but I came to understand that I could get the content no matter where I was, as long as I had a laptop and internet, and that was provided for me by Learning Lions. And also other students have benefited from this because it's easier for them, for those who can't afford to go to colleges, those who can't afford to pay for their school fees. For those who have been lucky to join Learning Lions, it's really been a life-changing experience because they can learn and they can still stay at home and take care of their families. An example of that, I learned from home, I'm earning from home, and I'm trying to help other young people from home, and that's fulfilling to me, and also for other young women and other young people back in Turkana, and especially in those who are joining in Learning Lions.
That's really impressive. And talking about learning from home and now giving back at home, I guess that's what education technology and in general open educational resources can help do. And Suraj, I want to come back to you, of course, because open educational resources present education stakeholders an opportunity to democratize access to education. But then again, how do we set the ball rolling? Because there are only just a few institutions that have done this with OERs. So how do we make sure that the ball has been set and it's rolling as fast as it should?
Okay. So first, let's take the two scenarios of learning. We have the traditional face-to-face learning, and here as well, OERs can be used from early childhood development, primary, secondary school education, to even adulthood. But also the regulators and the policymakers of education content need to start availing or at least putting in measures of how to bring in the OER resources into face-to-face learning as well. Then you have the number two, which is the online learning using education technology, which is currently gaining a lot of momentum to override shockwaves like we're seeing during the COVID-19 pandemic, shockwaves to the traditional face-to-face learning. Here, digital learning is availing access to education anytime, anywhere, to a much wider audience. Now, when it comes to content, education content, digital content, there are three types. There's one, which is open license, open source, which is free to access, free to adapt. There's also proprietary content, which is free to access, but you cannot adapt it. And then, of course, there's always the proprietary content, which is at a cost and which is fairly rigid. These three can live in harmony. So what needs to be done is we need to bring policymakers, we need to bring the EdTech community, we need to bring development agencies together to communicate frankly, freely on how all these three can sort of exist in harmony.
Okay, and existing in harmony as well is something that's important, because without that harmony, it's so difficult as well to get this incorporated, not just in the syllabi, but in the curricula as well, because it's important that the policymakers and the stakeholders do understand this. But we're going to come to that. Jay, back to you. With brick and mortar being complemented with online learning, and of course, this aided by education technology, how do we encourage more creators in Kenya to join the OER players?
So I think there's a lot of interesting ways to do that. The first thing I would look at is how people are learning outside school now. And a lot of the stuff on TikTok, on YouTube, is created by young people. And you'd get a ton of young people in this country and around the world making funny, informative, engaging content. And I believe we could set up tests, for example, where certain people who like a certain type of sense of humor could study on these OERs, others could study on traditional, boring OERs, others could read textbooks, and we could start to see which things are more engaging, which things help where. And I think it's important to remember that we're in a world now where creating is how you create wealth. It's not about going around the world taking stuff from someone else. It's coming together through commerce and creating things. And so we can't just be testing young people on their ability to memorize some stuff and pass a test. We have to be getting them involved in creating and telling their own stories. And as a society, not just here, but in the United States, around the world, we all have to get comfortable with the fact that young people are going to talk to each other, they are going to tell stories, and we need to meet them where they are, show them a good reason to take one more step forward towards science, towards technology, towards understanding history and the value of culture and the past, and how the past can affect the future.
Right, the past affecting the future. And when it comes to the users themselves, Maureen, I want to bring you into this. Given your experience and how you shared about it has been able to make you, or to allow you, give back at home, but also work at home, benefit while at home, how exactly do you think other users as well can be encouraged to use more of OER material or open educational resources?
I've always told my students to make Google is your friend. From my own experience, it benefiting my own life and other people's lives that I've seen, I would say that the open educational resource content is the right way to go right now, especially in this generation. It's the easiest, it's the fastest, and it's very flexible. It doesn't matter where you are, as long as you have access to internet, then you can access it almost low to almost free, low cost to free, and it's cheap and affordable.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and so given what you just mentioned, just tell me briefly, what exactly are your concerns when it comes to the use of open educational resources and having access to openly licensed material?
My concerns would be, back at home in Turkana, I only know of two, and there's so many people back at home who can't afford education. So that's my concern, that there are not enough facilities, there are not enough coaches to guide the students or the learners on where to get information, the right kind of information.
All right. Suraj, I want to bring you back into this conversation because she just mentioned that there are not enough platforms where this information can be accessed. And this goes back to our stakeholders that you did mention, the policymakers. How can they play a role in ensuring that this happens? Because, talking about the curricula and the syllabi, all of that can come into play as well, that in the long term, we're able to see more platforms available. But do you want to just share a bit more on that?
Sure. So let's take Kenya as an example. The UNESCO 2019 recommendations, Kenya signed up for, migrating a lot of the education resources into an OER system. So the willingness is there, the policy exists, or probably needs a little bit modification. Now, what we need to do is, from the private sector, from the development world, from the EdTech community to the education community, we all need to come together in a partnership to figure out the best way to make awareness, access. So this can become a much wider public-private partnerships where development agencies, government regulators, or custodians of education can initially fund a initial basic level of service, which allows for free access to open education resources, and then perhaps there can be a second level of service, which is like a premium for more specialized access to those very services a few steps ahead, and that could be for a free. So I think that could be a solution, but happy to hear from our viewers. If they have different ideas, please call in, write in, and let us know if you have any ideas around this very important discussion.
All right. Jay, do you think that OER, or who should be our players and creators in the OER space, do understand fully what open licensing is all about? Because I think that while we'll talk about allowing for their information to be shareable online, when you talk about open licenses, it's not really something that maybe they are welcome to. How do we make sure that this is happening more? Explaining to them that it's not just bouncing off your content online, but it also comes with benefits. How do we make them understand open licenses?
That's a really good question. I can say that Tuna Pond Institute, working with Learning Lions, has been focusing on how to teach young people how to tell stories. So we've got lessons going online from everything from how do you come up with learning objectives? How do you write a script around that? How do you storyboard it? How do you shoot it? And right now we're focusing on how to lower the cost of that production. And I think what the publishers and the other players are going to see is young people and even parents gravitating towards stories that are told in their own voice and that align to professionally vetted learning objectives. So the publishers, those players, could act as certifying bodies, for example. There could be a fee that you pay to say that your stuff's good. There could even be teachers who are certified under a certain publisher and are certified to use their content. There's a lot of ways that they can figure this out, and they're well positioned as institutions that provide trust in the market. So we need to meet people where they are, provide them with a better experience, and help take that wisdom and knowledge that publishers and that academics and experienced teachers have, and get that wisdom into younger people, into fresh teachers, and help come together to really mix great, youthful storytelling with that wisdom that comes from older people, people like Bitanga and Demo, people like the great Wangari Maathai, all of these great storytellers and teachers that have been here in Kenya for decades. And I know tons of phenomenal teachers and storytellers. So I think it's just a question of being creative, thinking outside the box, trying stuff, and listening to what people want and what they consume.
All right. And are there any risks when it comes to open licensing? If any, what are they, and how do players navigate them?
The two risks I see are bad material, so things that mislead people. And people need to be aware that we are, as humans, susceptible to story, and know where we should believe things and where we shouldn't. So that's the first thing, is verifiability. The second problem is, how do you get the upfront investment to actually create these materials? And that's fundamentally time, it's equipment, it's coordination, setting up the learning objectives. All of that, I think, can be done more cheaply, leveraging software. And so I do think there's a place for high quality, well-produced content. We have a rating system for, were the quiz questions good? Was the audio good? Was the video good? Did the story engage you? And that's not there for us to decide this is A grade and this is B grade. It's to give the content creators feedback on how they can improve their craft. I think there's gonna be like an e-learning type of industry that can come up around certain topics. And I think you're gonna see crowdfunding of like, people wanna know about a certain topic. Let me throw in 100 shillings. If enough people throw in 100 shillings, a week later we get well-produced video content.
And all of this cannot happen without partnerships, which is where I want to bring in Suraj as well, to give us a bit of context on how partnerships can help enhance open educational resources and also help the authors or content creators deal with the issue of openly licensing their material and putting it online with partnerships as well. Suraj, if you just want to talk about that for a bit.
Sure. So, look, one of the things we've established today is that open education resources and the sustainability of the EdTech ecosystem are mutually beneficial. One cannot do without the other. And the goal of both is to expand the access to quality and relevant education. So that creation can come through either state-sponsored or development agency-sponsored kind of, because a lot of development agencies, their primary goal is whatever projects they support needs to be accessed by every one NG. If it's Kenya, everyone needs to have access to it. So that level can be worked at that. And then, of course, there are organizations like the Regional Center of Innovative Teaching and Learning at Muscat Foundation that's looking to catalyze the EdTech ecosystem in a slightly more sustainable, for-profit grow for the benefit of Africa that allows more specialized EdTech resources to come together.
All right. Okay, Jay, I want to hear your views on this when it comes to partnerships. How do we ensure that these help to encourage more OER players to go out there and put their work online and make sure that it is accessible to all?
Part of it, I think, comes from philosophical and practical alignment to what's behind OERs, which is the belief that knowledge shared and skills acquired doesn't just make the learner richer, it makes the country richer, it makes the world richer. And so there's a lot of people who won't get into partnerships if there's going to be a copyright on the material. And there are a lot of funders who won't put money behind something if it's going to have a copyright behind it. And I think we want to see communities and community centers with parental involvement, with community leaders involved, who demand to work with OERs, because then the young people in their community will be able to modify them, and through that modification, get their name out there, get experience online, and build a brand and build marketable skills. So I think it's going to come from really a combination of this, philosophical and practical, with hopefully a community-driven approach.
All right. Maureen, I want to hear from you. If, say, you were to pass on a message, let's give an example to the government of Kenya in terms of implementing OERs, what would that be coming from you as a one student to now a coach who is helping other learners as well use open educational resources?
I would really urge the government to try put some effort and work together with organizations or partners that already exist in these areas that understand the benefits of OER to the young people, because as Jay said, internet is here to stay. So would like more institutions like Learning Lions and Tunapanda Institute to be encouraged in counties around Kenya. And as I would say from my home, it would be really helpful because so many students don't get to access this. So it would be really helpful, it would be really empowering and even encouraging and motivating. Like in my home, Turkana, you've heard of people talking about it's one of the poorest areas in Kenya, but through skills that can be acquired through OER and in these institutions like Learning Lions and Tunapanda, young women in Turkana, in a program called Tech Dada that I also co-founded, it has encouraged even young mothers to come to Learning Lions to join, because we make it easier for them to understand. We make the content available. When you educated a woman, there's an African say that when you've educated a woman or a girl child, that you've educated the whole village.
All right, I love that. I love that. Suraj, I want to give you the last word. Bottom line, what are we looking at when it comes to open educational resources? Where do we go from here? Because it's not really a new phenomenon in Kenya. It's been in existence for some years, but it's the uptake that we now need to pace up. So where do we go from here?
We follow Maureen's example, would be my simplest way to say it. She said it, and she said something that's quite scary, that people in her area have given up on education. You know, that is scary, because look, the foundational skills from education is what will lead our youth into dignified and fulfilling work, something that, you know, is embodied in the MasterCard Foundation's Young Africa Work strategy. But we also take an example of Maureen, who's defied all odds, all barriers, to use open education resources, to use technology, to not only improve her skills, but that of the community. So where do we go from here? Let's open up these dialogues. We will do what we can as MasterCard Foundation to open up the dialogues between all the stakeholders on this very important subject and take it to the next level of thinking it through, harmonizing all the various sectors, and implementation.
Right. Implementation is key in making sure that open educational resources thrive in the country and that we have more players, especially the younger players that we do have, the young authors, the content creators as well. So I want to say a big thank you to all our panelists today for making this conversation very insightful and very informative. I think that now we know where to start and continue the conversation on open educational resources. So thank you to Maureen Apu, who is a content creator and ICT coach from Learning Lions all the way in Turkana County. Thank you for making time and coming all the way to Nairobi to have this conversation with us. Jay Larson, who is the co-founder for Tunapanda Institute, thank you so much as well for sharing such insightful information, informative information on open educational resources and also the work that you're doing in Kibera and around the country. And Suraj Shah, who is the lead regional center for innovative teaching and learning at the MasterCard Foundation, and for the work you're doing as well around education technology around the country and across the region. Thank you so much. Our sign language interpreter, Rose Amolo, thank you for a fantastic job. I don't know how you were able to interpret open resource or open educational resources, but I'm sure you've done a fantastic job. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. Thank you all for making time to have this conversation. We will have yet another edition in July, and we're going to be talking about crowdsourcing and how this plays into education technology to help advance education and learning. Until then, it's bye-bye from me, and thank you to the entire production team for putting this together and making it happen, and to the MasterCard Foundation as well. Thank you. Bye-bye for now.